getting the individual lessons. I can do a semi-private with no problem with 2 people and myself. So that's where I'm at. If anybody out there that is doing open and is doing anything other than that, please chime in.
Yeah, Randy, I don't think Blake's on the call, so I'll speak on his behalf. We help him with a couple things from a summer camp side. We've altered our summer camp schedule and are doing a number of different things, but we are opening for camps. We're starting second week in June and moving through August, limiting the number of kids as well as the hours, social distancing, sanitizing stations throughout the camp area. We've had, just as you would expect, kind of a mixed bag of reactions. Some parents, it's the good thing is, though, it's been mostly positive. People, I think parents are wanting to get their kids out of the house. And again, we're really communicating the steps we're taking to make sure we're keeping their kids safe. And I think parents are really appreciative of that. So, yeah, I would say 20% are probably not comfortable, and 80% are still on board and wanting to still come.
Thank you. I know there's somebody still trying to get on the range and teaching again. I saw Brian Schipple. Have you gotten yourself back to teaching again at Arroyo?
No, not yet. Still not teaching. We did go ahead and kind of game plan a summer camp starting mid-June as well. Same thing you're talking about, 4 to 1, two instructors, 8 total for the camp at 3 hours each. And then also put together more of an elite player camp where we're just going to take the kids on golf course, same format as 4 to 1, 2 instructors. Not teaching yet on the range.
Have you followed up with that?
Yeah, a couple times.
Okay. All right. I want to introduce our featured speakers here. We have Jim Hartnett, who I've known for a little bit. He's an over 25-year PGA member. He's worked at Sahali Country Club out at Kapalua, that PGA West with the Jim McLean schools. I met him a couple of summers ago. We were collaborating and doing a camp for a group from some juniors from China, and I was able to see what he was doing. And he talked about this eye dominance and importance of it. It was very intriguing, and then very educational. To where I actually used his theory and did a tip on the Golf Channel that was received really well, because no one really has done this type of study as intensely as he has. We also have, all the way from Ireland, Richard Hughes, who is an optometrist, but they don't call them doctors, I guess, in Ireland. But he's going to be on the call. Richard, just question, how's it going over there with this coronavirus, and the golf course is open and everything is open for teaching over there?
Yeah, no, it's very similar to what I'm hearing from you. I don't think the teaching is at the same stage, but the course is open for the first time on Monday after 8 weeks closed. So there was no golf for 8 weeks, and it's social distancing, but they're opened. There'll be no competitions, I'd say, for another 2 months.
Yeah. All right. Well, thank you. And thank you for being with us today. So with that, Jim, how did I get started with this eye dominance thing? I know you've been studying this for the past, 18 years or so, and now just by observation, but now we have, the optometrists in the world that are also confirming everything that you have written with your book. So how did it all get started? What did you see with the eye dominance part of it?
Well, I kind of years ago, when I was working at Sahali, wondered why so many people couldn't get very good at golf. And the statistics were that a lot of people didn't really improve that much with lessons. So that kind of started me on a journey of all kinds of different hypotheses of what could be the critical cause. And after years of looking at it, in the early 90s, I said, God, there's something to do with this eye dominant. So players like, I don't know if you can see that, Annika, Appleby, Allenby, Durant, Duval, they all had what would be considered a weird impact position. And I remember when I was talking with Jim McLean, I said, why do they do that? And he said, because they do. And I said, but there's got to be a reason. So I looked into it further, and then got to meet when I was at Kapalua, an eye doctor for the LA Kings and an eye doctor for the Sacramento Kings, and I explained it to them. And they said, yeah, that makes sense. I don't know why people don't do that. So what I learned was that basically, to break it down into a nutshell, is right eye dominant players should have a shorter backswing. Like Annika, Appleby, Durant, Duval, they don't turn their shoulders over 90 degrees typically. Left eye dominant players turn their shoulders about 115 degrees on tour. Left eye dominant players keep their head back to get to impact. When right eye dominant players do that, the right shoulder stalls out and they tend to hit shoves and hooks. So I remember the first time I worked with a major winner, Ian Baker Finch. I explained all this to him, and he started hitting balls, and he thought it was great, but he looked at me like I had a third eyeball in the center of my forehead. So he's like, yeah, this works, but I don't understand why it works. And I couldn't explain from a medical standpoint why it worked. I just was explaining the similarities in right eye dominant players. And he hit it is the best he's hit it in years. But did he stick with it? No, because it didn't really make sense to him. And then worked with a lot of other players, and then ended up working with Corey Pavin. He went from hitting at 246 the day I met with him to 291 the next day. So, but that was kind of a swearing back and forth. He's like, there's no effing way this works. This is voodoo. This is BS. But he had one of his best years ever right after we worked with him on that. And then working with Hensby on the same thing. But there's a lot of ways to do this. And then writing the book was a fun experience. I got some negative comments because people thought, it's not a proven technique. And then luckily, I got a lot of good comments too. And then luckily this doctor, Richard Hughes, sorry, Doc, read the book in Ireland and contacted me back in March and said, I wrote to David Ledbetter about this 10, 12 years ago. And I agree with everything that's in your book. We need to write a paper. So we've worked with him and another optometrist in Ireland to put together a medical document verifying the findings that I've had in my book. How's that, Randy? So the biggest difference that you'll see is that the cone of vision, and Richard will talk about this a little bit. Left eye dominant players, 80% of people are right-handed, right eye, at least 80%, right ear, right-handed. It was very odd to find out that like 80% plus on tour are cross-dominant. That means right-handed, left eye. And most of the teaching is done to the Tiger Woods type golf swing. You don't see too many people teaching Appleby swing or Durant swing or Duval swing.
Let me just kind of give you my experience when we started talking and you were helping me. So I'm that type one where I'm right eye dominant and then right-handed swinging. And my faults over the years has always been a short backswing. Didn't really understand that. And I've got a kind of I got a big little Chinese nose that that definitely gets in the way. So once I take the golf club back, if I make that full turn, I actually almost lose sight of the golf ball. So that was really intriguing, and that that exercise that I did with getting my sunglasses and taping my non-dominant eye, and then, you know, making swings, either getting used to not making a turn, not being able to see the golf ball actually when I made a full turn, or put myself in a position where I could. And I think Richard is going to talk about that part of it, what it does to the brain. Really made me understand the things I needed to work on and why it worked. So for everyone out there, definitely help myself out with my golf swing. So I know Richard Hughes talked about earlier when we first started talking about what it does to your brain. Richard, can you talk about that?
Sure. Yeah, it's you're totally unaware that you lose fixation, and that's the important thing about all this. So you can play golf for all your life, and you're unaware. So the only way you can appreciate it, and I love that your analogy there, Andy, you have a short swing. Now, whether that was by accident, you understood that if you had a bigger swing, and you said a few reasons why you have a short swing. So if you lose fixation, and I think the important thing is you have to appreciate depth perception. You couldn't play golf with a pair of blinkers on you, because you need your peripheral vision as well and your central vision. And you could not play golf if your dominant eye was covered. You could play quite well if your non-dominant eye is covered, because your dominant eye gives you your aiming position. It's your aiming eye. And your non-dominant eye gives you your sense of where you are in space, how far you're
perception.
Okay, how far you're away from something. So when you lose either your aiming eye, which will be very critical to the golf swing, your dominant eye, but if you lose fixation of your non-dominant eye and you have a lateral sway, and then you pick it up, well, what's going to happen in the visual cortex in your brain? There's going to be, all of a sudden, your brain programs the ball to be further away than it actually is. The ball didn't move, but it apparently moved in your brain. And you can understand that when you point at something, or you take your club and you point your index finger down at the ball. So this happens and you're totally unaware. And the effect it has on your swing is quite detrimental. It's a guesswork. After that, it's guesswork if you hit a good shot. It's lucky if you hit a good shot.
And Richard, if I can interject for just a second.
Yeah.
What I saw in real good players, even like Jerry Pate, they had a problem hitting hooks because when they had to reacquire the golf ball on their downswing, their right shoulder stopped, which slowed their shoulder rotation down, and it's harder to keep the club face squared up. So that a lot of right-eye dominant players they kind of have a difficult time under pressure because of that, taking too long of a backswing and ending up flipping it at the bottom.
Well, that's all. Yeah, the technical. I wouldn't understand all the technical aspects of it. Just say the visual sense is the most important sense. That's why you become a good athlete. Athletes, golf self-selects because of vision as well. I've never yet met a scratch golfer, never, that doesn't have good distance vision. That's a component of how your two eyes work together, whether that's by laser surgery, contact lenses, or glasses. Now, there is exceptions, but I haven't met any myself, and I'd have tested maybe 50 scratch golfers, and they all have super distance vision. So for my own son being a type 1, he would have been totally unaware of this. And we have videos of him 3 years ago where his cone of vision, that's your two eyes together, was looking slightly right at the ball at the top of his backswing, okay? Instead of looking at the ball, okay? So he had lost fixation because his nose gets in the way of the right eye. Now we can see a video and he's looking at the ball with his two eyes. Now that doesn't make you a great player, or it doesn't, but all of a sudden you have proper depth perception on every shot. So you don't need to reprogram the brain. The brain gets used to, this is the distance you're away because your two eyes from the ball are looking at the ball. So it's very important. You have good vision. You have good vision in your dominant eye, and that the two eyes remain on the ball for the type 1. So, and now at point of impact, he knows now that Jim's book is the Bible on this. Like, it's amazing. You can read You can look up the internet and there will be millions of articles about eye dominance in putting, in baseball, in all American sports. They're very much into it, eye dominance. But nobody has explained what happens in a golf swing until Jim wrote the book. I've read lots of articles on the internet, and they'll talk about focusing, and they'll talk about all convergence, and they'll talk about everything else. But nobody has articulated what happens in the brain when you're having that motion. It's a dynamic motion, and if you're swaying or your eyes are moving, you cannot keep your eyes on the ball. Now, the better the player, the chances are they are keeping their eyes on the ball. So this is where lessons come in. Obviously, that's not my area, but I can know from my son, the bigger the shoulder turn, you have to take your head further back. The bigger the shoulder is going to move your head, your right eye off the ball. And then the same on the way down. You know, we're always told, keep our head down, look at the ball, and that's going to slow down the right shoulder, as Jim says. So from an optical point of view, from a physiological point of view, Jim's book is just, it's amazing that he would have seen this and been a non-optical person. When I read the book, I don't know Jim Hartnett, I never met the man. I just read the book and I got in contact with him. And for me, it was everything I know in optics coming together, because I'm a fanatic on golf and I'm a fanatic on sports vision and a lot of different sports. And wow, I said, how could a man that isn't optical, because my own friends, he couldn't understand this.
Especially after he talked to me, he realized I wasn't that smart. He was very surprised.
Hey,
Like,
Jim,
yeah, sorry.
can you take us through kind of so I assume that every lesson you give, at least at the start, you're making some sort of dominant eye assessment.
Yes.
And would you mind taking us through kind of, is it a change in setup? Is it change in impact position? Would you mind taking us through kind of what that process is?
So the first thing is, and I don't talk about it a lot in the golf swing, I'll explain it to somebody through right eye dominant, but you just have them hold their finger out straight extended. Okay, and then close one eye and close the other eye, where your finger stays on the target is your dominant eye. So like when I'm looking at the screen right now, when I close my right eye, I'm still center. When I close my left eye, it moves over like 15 degrees. So once I understand that, I explain to people that their nose is only going to rotate like 15, 20 degrees, which is going to limit their shoulder rotation. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Because if you're left eye dominant, you can turn all the ways back here and you can still see out of your dominant eye. If you're right eye dominant, that's as far as you can turn and still see out of your dominant eye. The minute you lose fixation out of your right eye, if it's your dominant eye, you're going to have to slow down to reacquire where the golf ball is, because like Richard said, it is mentally moved a foot further left in your brain. So now you're having to reacquire and readjust your downswing. And one of the other interesting things is left eye dominant players start their downswing with separation of the shoulder and the chin. Right eye dominant players start the downswing with the chin and the shoulder moving together to get their cone of vision focused on the golf ball. Did you see me do that okay?
Yeah, so essentially what you're saying is the reason why Duvall and Annika make this, I don't know if it's necessarily a unique move, it's just simply because they are trying to see the golf ball during the golf swing. I mean, it's as simple as that.
Yeah, in fact, I asked a lot of right eye dominant players on tour, I said, what is your eye dominance? I don't know. I'm like, well, I think you're right eye dominant. Oh, let me see. Oh, yeah, I am. Oh, that's weird. I never knew that. I was shocked that they didn't know, that some of the best players in the world didn't know their eye dominance. And that's why their whole golf swing was shaped the way it was.
Interesting. So give me an idea if you get a right eye dominant player looking to create more power, right? So you're obviously saying, well, we're not going to try to go with a bigger backswing.
Correct.
How would you go about doing that?
You're going to equal or further your speed by body rotation through impact. So left eye dominant, your shoulders kind of slow down, extend, all that kind of good stuff. Right eye dominant, they typically have a stronger left hand grip and they rotate their body much faster through impact. So that's why you don't see right eye dominant players necessarily shorter. You would think that they would hit it shorter, but they don't.
So Jim, when you have a person and you've assessed all of that, what do you tell them that they need to do? Like what Anthony was saying is, if you're, for instance, myself, right eye dominant, right-handed swing, is there a setup? Is there just, you have to just make sure you're gonna lose sight of the ball? What are the things that you tell your students?
Well, one of the things that I do, and you know this, Randy, because I did this to you, is trying to explain all this gets confusing. If you put on a pair of sunglasses and tape up their non-dominant eye, they do everything they're supposed to do without any instruction. It's very weird. I had Mark Hensby taped up his left eye for a half an hour, and he started hitting the ball 25, 30 yards further off the tee. Now,
You just adjust it yourself. Yeah.
That's the easiest way to do it. You put on the glasses and do that, and you'll self-adjust because your brain wants to have a good vision on the ball, and you're only turning out of your cone of vision because you've been taught to.
I would assume a right eye dominant player is probably going to be a little more stacked, like over the ball as opposed to shoulder or tilt.
Yeah, you'll see a lot of times left eye dominant players will get their head back behind the ball. Right eye dominant players tend to have their dominant eye float over the top of the ball to vertically align. So you'll see much more left leaning, much more Matt O'Grady, that kind of stuff. You don't see him doing a lot of floating off the ball.
So you're mentioning about juniors and importance of getting our juniors going, with the right things. Tell us a little about that importance.
Well, I think when you look at juniors, I love watching kids that don't know anything about golf just whack the crap out of the ball, and they have a good time doing it. And a lot of times, we don't know, if you're not normally aware that 80% of those kids are not cross dominant. So they're losing vision out of their eye when they're turning all over the place. And when we teach them to keep their head still and their head behind the ball, we're really limiting their ability. So I think it's really important with junior golfers that you do a quick test. You know what their eye dominance is, so you don't inhibit their ability to get better. And I mean, Richard can talk to that. That sounds like a boasting statement, maybe, or an overstatement, but it really is essential to someone reaching their potential, understanding what their eye dominance is.
I can just say my own son, he wouldn't have got many lessons in the first 5 or 6 years. And he was an athlete. He plays football. He's a big guy. And he just went out for fun and swung mad and hit the ball well. So it was only when he began getting a lot of lessons, and it was only when I read Jim's book that this resonated with me, that if we had understood that this big turn away and losing fixation of the golf ball maybe the reason why he wasn't progressing. We can never say for definite, and there's lots of gets in the way of a player progressing. There's no. But the main thing is to enjoy your game, and I think you enjoy it and you play it and you'll want more lessons if you can understand, well, this is something you shouldn't do, lose fixation. I think that's as simple as that, and it has never been explained before. Like, why would you want to lose fixation? And it's not, and here I am 35 years later, only getting the penny dropping with me, so there's no chance of it dropping with coaches, except Jim and people that he has talked to. Like, if my own optometrist friends in sports vision don't understand it. So this is all new, gentlemen, and it's quite confounding. It's natural, and it'll just bring something extra, I feel, to the enjoyment for all the 80%. And not all them 80% don't succeed, but there's no reason why a lot more of them shouldn't become better. Very few become tour players anyhow. But there's no reason why they shouldn't reach their potential. I think that's what I'm saying, basically.
Yeah, and I'm not saying that if you understand your eye dominance, you're obviously going to be a great player automatically. It's just a matter of making sure that when you are improving your golf swing, that you don't make moves that inhibit your ability to get better.
Jim, how have you seen eye dominance affect putting? Is there any effect? And how are you?
There's a big effect on aiming, but I'll leave that up to Dr. Farnsworth. I'm not an expert on the putting side, to be honest with you. As if you played with me, you'd see with my putting that I'm not an expert.
I would say the type 1s make up for the lack in the long game because of losing fixation. They should have a natural advantage in putting, the type 1s.
If their face is rotated towards the target.
Yeah, it's all down the line. If you play pool or snooker, you know, the eye it's down the line. I know this eye is closest to the hole and their peripheral vision, their left eye, but they should be able to aim better, I feel, from behind the ball rather than the cross dominant players. Because golf demands 6-7 hours a day to get good at it, they learn, because the ball is always constant for the cross dominant player. It's always left. It's always in their brain where it's not exactly. So they learn to practice that where exactly it is.
Great stuff. Mr. Hughes, would you, for any of our coaches, and just thinking about our vision and the clarity of our vision, is there anything that we could help our students do to improve their vision, or is that strictly left to an optometrist?
Is there anything? Yeah, it's strictly left to an optometrist. Yeah, obviously glare recovery, fatigue of the muscles of the body. Same thing happens at the eye. Fatigue as the round goes on. So nutrition, obviously dehydration, they're all the things you'd have anyhow. But glare, some people can cope with glare, other people can't. So to do a test on glare recovery, how they are, like a filter in a pair of sunglasses has a big effect on what you see and the way you react. So, no, provided you're dominant eye, provided you're tested binocularly and that your vision is balanced, it has a big effect. Yeah. So I'd go to a sports vision optometrist that understands why you should be, rather than maybe an optometrist wouldn't be into the nuances of a golf swing and why you should have your dominant eye. Definitely your dominant eye's vision should be better than your non-dominant, or at least as good. And if you develop a cataract or something happened to your dominant eye, you got an accident, the brain will reapply the left eye, your non-dominant eye, to be your dominant eye. So this can happen very slowly, very insidiously, and you'll be unaware that it's happening. Okay, so if you had a different prescription in one eye than the other, you could become a little bit short-sighted in your dominant eye because you're on a screen 8 hours a day and you're working hard there at close work, depending on your age. So in their 20s, I would say tour players have to watch that they don't become slightly more short-sighted in the dominant eye.
And I might add that when I was at Kapalua, when I got completely into this, I talked to a doctor and he gave me some software and I changed my eye dominance. I don't recommend it. Got horrible headaches. It was for a couple, 2-3 months I did that. I loved swinging like a right eye dominant player, but without doing those exercises, it went back to my dominant eye like a couple of weeks after the exercises. And the other thing I might mention is if you're going to teach this, getting the cone of vision on the golf ball, don't do it without video. Because even like Corey Pavin, when I had him with his nose pointed 5 degrees left of the golf ball, he thought he was looking at the targeted impact. And he didn't. I showed him the video and he's like, no, that's not this one. That's a different one. I had to film it again. And he had to watch me actually take the camera and show him that I wasn't messing with him. Because when you first take a person that's right eye dominant that learns to swing left eye dominant, when you just try to get them to right here, they feel like they're looking at the targeted impact. In fact, I tell them, try to look at the target before you hit the golf ball. They can't do it. But you do that just solely to get them on camera to realize how much their motor patterns have been ingrained through hitting thousands and thousands and millions of golf balls.
Richard, when people tell me that they try to keep their eye on the ball until they see it come off the club head, they are just imagining that, aren't they?
Correct. Totally.
Okay, so I want to get.
Or else they haven't hit the ball very well, or they haven't gone back very far. I don't think it's possible. No, not the speed the ball is going at. You can see it in your periphery, I think, but you don't see the club head hitting the ball. No.
Okay, good.
No, I don't think it's physically possible.
Hey, Randy, would you mind sharing your experience? Before, when you were, before kind of learning this information, were you trying to swing maybe a different way than your dominance?
Well, no, it's like what he said. When I was trying to make a normal full turn, I think what the weaknesses of my swing, when I get under pressure, I get short and quick, and I totally understand probably why. You know, I get back and I want to get to the golf ball faster. If I do make that full turn, and whenever I make a full turn and finish the turn, I hit the ball better. But it was like Jim said, or even Richard said, is that your mind, it messes up your timing and everything and everything else, you know, making that full turn, not used to it. So yes, I think my short quick swing has come about because of this eye dominance thing. But in training for it now and getting used to it, and when I did that drill where I just taped up one side of my sunglasses, and then your body, you learn how to go ahead and make that full turn. But again, like anything else, it takes a bunch of practice now getting used to it. So that was my experience, at least understanding why made a big difference. So now I've got to train my mind to you know, to make sure I make a full turn. And now I know that I made a full turn because I actually feel I lose sight of the golf ball, but I'm getting used to that now. The other side of it was, you know, I think, Jim, you're saying is like with that right eye dominance, we don't quite get all the way through the swing. We tend to
cut off the follow through and slow down.
Yeah, you kind of get a little short and not get all the way through. Now, Jim, would you, like, when you get a new person, then, you know, in your at your lesson, and you're doing this now, as picking up a club for the first time, would you recommend a certain way to learn the swing?
Yeah, absolutely. I always ask people first off, what eye dominance are you? Normally, you can tell when they start swinging because you can see how their head moves. And sometimes I'll throw a ball to them right at their nose and see which hand reaches out, and then their head will tilt. So that'll tell me without even letting them know. Because you'll always tilt your nose to get your dominant eye facing a moving, something that's moving coming at you, especially a golf ball that you think might hit you in the forehead. So then you just explain to people, okay, you're right eye dominant. You got to be careful that you don't try to take too big of a shoulder turn because you'll lose vision out of your right eye. The people that haven't made the habits already, it's super simple. They don't need a lot of explanation. They'll go, oh, okay, that makes sense. So if I turn my head back too far, I can't see it through my nose. That's too far. Yes. And it's harder when you have like a tour player, because I've worked with a lot of tour players with this. Their habits are so ingrained. And you know, Randy, working with tour players, they're very averse to change. I mean, they're very skeptical. They're very, you know, you're screwing with my living, my livelihood.
They don't want to be uncomfortable.
No, they don't want to be uncomfortable. So, but like I said, juniors and beginning golfers, this is super easy to teach to. And it just makes their progress become easier.
So again, sorry, Randy, go ahead. I'll just ask a quick question, just to reiterate. For a beginning golfer, maybe even for an intermediate golfer, the only thing you're doing is maybe putting a pair of glasses on them that are enforcing their correct eye dominance and having them get used to that.
And then explaining to them why I'm doing that. That's it.
Okay.
And then they'll feel their way through the rest of it by themselves.
Okay, great.
I mean, that's kind of why it's kind of difficult, because once you get told that it's so simple, you can't charge a series of 5 lessons on eye dominance. I mean, once you've gone through 15 minutes of explaining it, it's like, well, they're like, what's next? Well, with that's it. Get used to it.
Well, can I just come in? I would just say a junior golfer, they're constantly changing. So they need constant coaching in the same way they need to get their eyes checked every year, because it's human. It's a human body. It's changing. So their prescription may change. They may need glasses this year that they didn't need the year before. So that's going to have a big effect on how they progress as well. So it's so they need to monitor it. They need constant monitoring, I would say, as regards change. Just even in the eye dominance, that they constantly understand it. Yeah.
Yeah. Even Gary Player said, somebody asked him years ago, you know, how hard was it for you to get used to your body changing that much in your, you know, how much did it affect your golf game? And he said, my body, I'm still fit as hell. I'm still in great shape. It's my eyes that changed. That's what's ruined my golf game.
Yeah.
Heidi, you had a question? It kind of came up.
If I could just say about putting there at the flip and eye dominance, what happens a lot of players, the type ones especially, the left eye takes over the putting, the aim and putting. So they go behind the ball and they're over the ball and they look up at the hole and this eye can take over. Okay, so they'll miss them to the left. And cross-dominant people, find it hard to aim in the first place. So a flip in eye dominance, it's what happens at the top of your swing, but it also happens in putting. So you need to be aware, that has to be trained, and that's practice and practice as well, obviously.
That's exactly what it's funny you say that, because I'm left eye dominant, and that's exactly what I feel like if I'm aimed correctly, it feels like I'm aimed to the right.
Yeah.
Me too. I'm the same way.
Yeah.
You said you had a question, Randy?
Or Heidi, you there? I can ask it for you if you don't want to.
No. I'm here. How's everybody doing?
Hello.
Miss you guys. I've worked on this a lot. Like years ago, there was that book. God, now I'm blanking on the name, about putting and eye dominance, like 20 years ago, maybe. But question that I think about a lot is, and maybe experts know the answer, is like, why are the majority of humans, like what percent, 95 or more, right-handed in life? And does that also mean that the majority are right eye dominant?
No.
And then the question is also like, what makes someone, like I have two sons that are righty in life, but since they were babies, they wanted to swing lefty. So, I mean, like, why are most humans right eye dominant or right-handed?
Will I answer it?
Yeah, go ahead, because I would go deep on this one.
Evolution hasn't caught up. We're all hunter-gatherers at the end of the day. And if I can give you a scenario, if there was a tiger coming at you and you had a spear in your hand, well, you'd want to aim, be sure to kill that tiger. You'd aim at the heart of the tiger. But somebody that loses fixation and doesn't think fixation is important would just aim at the tiger and possibly miss the tiger. Okay? So we are hunter-gatherers. So we're all meant to be right-handed, right eye dominant. Okay? That's the way we're meant to be. Evolution has changed that. So, a matter of fact, playing a lot of games playing them left-handed could be the way to take it's more striking the ball. It could be the best way to learn. If you could play left-handed, it could be very good with your eye dominant, being right. Phil Mickelson is that way, is he?
Yeah, Mickelson.
Yeah,
yeah.
So that could be a big advantage. Yeah, it could be a huge advantage. But you can't mess around with your eye dominance. You're born with it like you're born with your handedness. They used to try and change you in school if you were left-handed to make sure you were right-handed. But them days are gone. You're born with your handedness and your eye.
One of the interesting things I received about that too, as far as evolutionary, was I got contacted after I wrote the book from a doctor from Oxford, and he wanted to know what my thoughts were on depression, drug addiction, and over-competitiveness because of eye dominance. I had to tell him I had no idea what he was talking about. But he explained to me that when you're cross-dominant, your cross-lateralization of the brain happens too, and you store information in different parts of the brain. And that's why people that are cross-dominant typically are higher dyslexia, higher drug addiction, more competitive.
Yes.
Suffer from depression much more often. So it's not exactly a great deal to be cross-dominant.
Wow, that's pretty gnarly. My son, exactly that.
And maybe that's why they are so good at golf, because they've coped with adversity all their lives, being cross-dominant. And golf demands you spend 7-8 hours a day at it. Okay? So you're willing to work hard and practice hard, and cross-dominance gives you that because you're born with this. So it does give you the physiological advantage to work hard and to practice hard, because school mightn't have been your thing. You might have seen you're better at golf. Obviously, you took up golf early, and you'd say, so being cross-dominant in school can lead to dyslexia. And that's a big area now. We're seeing a huge amount of kids being diagnosed with dyslexia because of screen time. And this is all new, like computers and all this is only in the last 50 years. So evolution is only catching up. There's a lot more kids now being cross-dominant and dyslexia. So being dyslexic is an advantage. It's a gift. And being cross-dominant can be a gift. Yeah. because you've coped with all this adversity, in other ways.
So what we are just training. We get our kids to try to train both sides of the ball now. What does that do to help help the brain? Because that's a big thing now, where we want to work the other side of your body, from the physical side of it, from the mental side of it as well. What is that doing?
Jim, do you want to answer that?
Well, I'm not sure I understand the question in the context of what we're discussing.
Well, as far as we know our dominance and everything, but now we're training, our other sides. I have the juniors. If they're right-handed, swing left-handed. Left-handed, swing right-handed. And work that side, work the other side of both the body and the brain. It must relate to all this. How does that help? Or I'm sure it helps, but I don't know the science of that.
It does help, yeah, because funny, my son actually practiced playing left-handed there today, and he said, wow, he didn't realize his nose came in the way. It was only when he swung left-handed he could really appreciate how his nose comes in the way. Okay, so he never fully understood that, and he was out just practicing. He said, I'll practice a bit of left-handed swings. So it has to be good, yeah, because you get all tight on one side. I'm sure it's good to loosen the other side as well. So you have to have balance. You have to do exercise to balance the body and to keep it in peak performance, I'm sure.
Yeah, from a training standpoint, you should definitely work on both sides. From your eye dominance, so I think it just helps you understand. I mean, that's the key to this all, is that you have to understand what your eye dominance is and how it affects the way your motor patterns are gonna go. And anything that you do that opposes the way your brain works and the way your eyes work is gonna make it very difficult for you to get anywhere close to your potential.
All right. That's some very good stuff, Jim and Richard. Any other questions out there from our group?
If I could, can I just jump in real quick on this?
Yes.
First of all, I don't know. You said at the beginning it's not Dr. Hughes because of Ireland. I'm going to call you Dr. Hughes anyway.
Yeah.
And
Thank
Jim,
you.
I'll call you Jim.
Yeah.
But no, it's my background initially was not golf. I was baseball, basketball my whole life growing up, and developed into golf, which I think is an advantage in some ways, just from a methodology. It's about being an athlete and being reactive and things versus memorizing some technical things. I also have a cousin who's an optometrist, so we've talked in and around this. I've never thought about it on this level, so this is fascinating. I can't wait to get back to the range and throw an eye patch on myself and see if I start smashing into things. But it's really interesting. We've talked about in a mental training world side of things a term kind of called mind blind, which is if you're if you're not focusing on the ball, so to speak, and you're drifting elsewhere. That there's consequences to being able to stay focused on things. If I'm playing catch with a baseball with someone and they're getting ready to throw the ball and I glance away just for a second and then I have to recapture the golf ball or recapture the ball coming at me, your body completely reacts to trying to find the ball first with tension, and then you can capture the golf ball, or the baseball. But if I'm playing catch with somebody, without thinking about the ball, if my eyes are just constantly in contact with the ball, then I can trace it all the way through and everything becomes fluid. And so from this perspective, if I have constant contact with the golf ball with my eyes and I'm able to continue in a fluid motion because I don't have to re-find it, it completely makes sense when you're saying it that way. I hadn't really thought about it that way.
Nobody in the world had.
It's really interesting. It completely relates to other sports completely.
I'll tell you how much it relates to other sports. Is I was giving lessons to the wide receivers coach from the Cowboys 20 years ago, and I told him about eye dominance, and he goes, "Do you think it would have anything to do with football?" And I said, "Well, it doesn't have anything to do with sports. It has to do with the way your brain works, the way your eyes work." And he said, "Well, let me think about this." And he actually realized that he sent some receivers that were right eye dominant down the right sideline patterns, and they had to rotate their head 20 more degrees, which slowed them down. So he changed the receivers' patterns based on their eye dominance.
And also, you would change if you're cross dominant, you're left eye dominant. I would have you playing on the right side of the pitch, so that opens up all that side of your evening eye. And the opposite. And rugby union, when England won the World Cup, they changed their winger from one wing to the other based on eye dominance. Simple as that. Just a simple eye dominance test, and the sports vision consultant said, you're playing on the wrong side of the pitch. You made it a point there, Josh, about if you played soccer, you can imagine Messi being the best player in the world or Ronaldo. They don't focus on the ball. Now, this is where peripheral vision comes in. Okay? So golf is the only sport where your head is down and your cone of vision. In soccer, the worst thing you could do is be focused on the ball. Okay? So it's your peripheral, it's central, and you notice motion in the periphery. Okay? So something moving in the periphery, you notice a lot quicker if you're not looking at it. Okay? So golf is the only sport for type 1s that is at a big disadvantage, because if they overturn, they don't have the two eyes. You don't need your two eyes on the ball in a lot of sports, but you have to be aware of the periphery. In golf, not as much. It's more central vision, okay, the cone of vision. So the cone of vision is different in every sport.
And Josh, I would say you're a baseball player, so was I. You can look at guys' stances. Guys with open stances,
Yeah.
right-handed batters typically are
Yeah.
right eye dominant. Guys with closed stances are left eye dominant.
Yeah,
It's
I was
just-
just I was right eye dominant, open stance, and I preferred going to right center field because I was able to see the ball deeper in and hit the ball the opposite way. And maybe that's preference and not related, but
No, it is related
sounds like it
completely.
is.
Yeah, you were. That's what Richard and I talk about. Is it's not that we're teaching anybody to do anything that is not natural for their brain to do, anyways. We're trying to get them to unlearn a learned behavior, a learned pattern. Because you didn't know why you started with an open stance in baseball, but you could see the ball better, you hit better, so you kept an open stance. If you'd have hit worse, you would have gone back to a closed stance.
Good stuff. Heidi wanted you to go over, Jim, again, the testing, the simple testing you did with the finger.
There's another test, Jim, this one.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So the easiest one, I used to do this in a while at the time, is make a little puka, a little hole between your hands. Get your shoulders square to a target, extend both hands out, make a little hole between your hands, like that. And then with both eyes open, and then close one eye and see if the target's still there. Close the other eye, open your dominant eye, and see if it moved. The eye that keeps that whatever you were focusing on in target is your dominant eye.
Well, can I just
Yeah, go ahead.
reiterate?
You're better at this.
Maybe do that 4 times and change your hand so there's no bias. But you need somebody looking at you. So focus on somebody opposite you, their nose, and they'll see which eye you're aiming with.
That's what I do during a lesson. I'll have them look at my nose.
It's not that accurate. If you just do it at some point, you need to get the other observation of the person that's looking at you, and they'll notice little moves that you have to move your head to look through the hole, and that's telling me there's a muscle imbalance in your eyes, and you definitely need to get your eyes tested. So good athletes would just do that, find your nose straight away. They just don't even have to think about it. They put the hand over, other people will be there and they'll be wondering, and they'll be sort of moving their head.
Yeah, it's funny.
Okay? So good athletes don't need to move their head to find your nose, because then they have an aiming problem. Okay, so it's do it 4 times, and you do the bias right hand over left and left over right, and get somebody to look at you to see which eye they see.
Yeah, because to your point, Richard, people will cheat it accidentally. They'll go, no, that's my dominant eye. And they're like, why don't you turn your head 25 degrees?
No. If you do a move like that, you have other problems. Yeah. Yeah.
So like, is everyone has a dominant eye then?
Yes.
Well,
So you haven't been to somebody that, so both eyes cannot be dominant.
yes, no, you can have equidominance, and they can have a problem with both eyes, and they need correction, refraction properly corrected. So you should have one dominant eye, but if one eye, your dominant eye, isn't seeing equally as well, the brain gets confused. Which eye is your dominant eye? So this can happen very gradually. You see, golf, the ball isn't moving. It's the only sport in baseball, American football, you're always looking at something coming towards you. In golf, it's just there, okay? And you're looking down perpendicular, you're looking down at it. So it's very different from a visual point of view compared to a lot of sports. But you have a dominant, your question is, you have a dominant eye, yeah.
Right.
What you don't want is a flippant dominance. Yeah.
Well, Dr. Hughes, yeah, we're here in America. We're going to call you doctor. Thank you so much for joining us. That was definitely a treat. Jim, thanks a lot for sharing all this stuff.
Thank you.
And again, for everybody, this is all recorded, and the information. There's a neat article that they did is available. Jim's book. What was the book's name again?
Golf for the Other 80%. It's on Amazon.
And you've got something else coming out? You said
I'm writing a book with two doctors called The Anatomy of the Golf Swing, but it deals more with muscle motion in the golf swing, muscle and joint motion.
All right. Well, thank you, gentlemen, so much. Definitely got some things that I know everyone on this call can take away, and definitely help explain a lot of things now for your students and for yourself in teaching.
And if anybody has any specific questions for me, feel free to email me at any time or call me.
Jim, would you mind? What's your email address so I can post it up here on the chat?
JimH@PGA.com.
JimH@PGA.com. Okay, and also, Randy, I wanted just to throw in there before we get everyone off the call. If you haven't got your PGA coach certification, please make sure you do that soon. For those of you who might not know, there's some things that are kind of going on in the background of First National goes. Getting your coach certification is kind of the first step. There's going to be a search engine that the PGA is launching during the PGA Championship. Obviously, that was supposed to happen this month, but again, getting your coach certification is kind of the first step there. And then us as a section are working very hard behind the scenes to come up with a few different tools to help our local students be kind of connected to you as coach program graduates, for lack of better terms. So yeah, Tom put in there as a directory. So just want to really encourage everyone on the call. If you haven't done that yet, please make sure you do that. It's the first step in a line of a couple things coming up.
Yeah, I was actually going to remind everybody about that. It doesn't take everything we talked about today still referred to that, talking about building these athletes, especially from the junior side of it and their different age groups on when you want to specialize. But we're trying to build golfers for life and retain them. And this is the first step of doing that. And if we're all on board with the PG.coach certification, we can all have, again, something that we all as PG professionals can agree upon. So do that. It only takes, I mean, if you folks have watched the Last Dance, that was 10 episodes. I'm sure everybody watched that. That's 10 hours. This thing you could get done in probably in one day, in a couple of hours, 2 to 3 hours at the most. So please go ahead and get certified on that. With that, thank you again, gentlemen, for sharing all that with us. Next week, we have Derek Ueda, who's going to talk about the putting side of it. I'm sure if I remember, talked about some of the eye dominant stuff in the putting as well. There's a possibility that Xander may be able to be on that call. So we will let you know. So tune in for next week's chat, and everybody continue to stay safe, and we'll see everybody next week.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Hey, thanks, Jim.
See you, Jim.
Cheers.
Bye. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Dr. Hughes.
See. Bye, guys. Okay. Enjoyed it. Thank you.
Well, hi, honey. I'm trying